to have died and more than 700 have been injured after a tsunami hit the coast of Indonesia. It's thought to have been caused by an undersea landslide following eruptions from the Krakatoa volcano.
Well, TV footage has shown images of water rushing into hotels and restaurants in beach towns right along the coast of West Java. Our reporter Caroline Rigby has more.
It began as any other evening, then this. The tsunami struck Indonesia on Saturday night, hitting beaches including popular tourist spots along the Sunda Strait, the channel between the islands of Java and Sumatra. The pop group 17 were performing when the wave engulfed their stage. Their singer confirmed on social media that the band's bass player and tour manager had died, and others, including his wife, were missing. Officials say the death toll is likely to continue to rise. Hundreds more were injured in the disaster, which authorities say may have been caused by underwater landslides following an eruption by the nearby Krakatoa volcano. Streets have now turned to mud and hundreds of buildings are seriously damaged. The country's disaster management agency says high seas from a full moon could have contributed to the strength of the waves. Indonesia is prone to earthquakes and tsunamis because it straddles the so-called Pacific Ring of Fire, where tectonic plates collide. This latest disaster will bring back memories of the Boxing Day tsunami 14 years ago, which killed more than 225,000 people. Caroline Rigby, BBC News.
Well, the BBC's Indonesia editor is Rebecca Henschke. She told us that the death toll is expected to rise.
That's right. We're heading to one of the worst affected areas on the west coast of Java, this row of beaches that are a popular holiday destination, where we're seeing footage and reports of quite widespread devastation there along the coast. A lot of houses there reduced to rubble, ships badly damaged, cars turned upside down. Also, local health centres there saying that they are struggling to cope with the injured, and also that body bags are piling up at these small health centres in this area. At the moment, the official death toll is 62, but we're hearing now reports more from the Sumatran side of that strait that we haven't received before, with some warning that the death toll there could be in the hundreds.
And Rebecca, obviously it's a developing situation, as we know. What more do we know about the timings and the magnitude of the quake which caused this tsunami?
Well, it wasn't in fact a quake. What the National Disaster Agency is saying is that it was volcanic activity on this volcano that sits in the middle of the Sunda Strait, Anak Krakatoa. It's risen out of the sea in the same place that famous volcano Krakatoa that erupted in 1883, killing thousands of people. You know, that was one of the deadliest and most devastating volcanic events in recorded history. Now, this Anak, or the child of that volcano, has been erupting, and some believe that it may have caused an underwater landslide so powerful that it triggered the tsunami. But because there wasn't a quake and there wasn't the usual warning or timing, this tsunami has really there by surprise. Extraordinary footage of a band playing to a crowd, and then suddenly the waves engulfed the stage, really showing the fact that people had no warning whatsoever when this tsunami hit at about 9:30 last night, local time.
That was Rebecca Henschke speaking to us earlier.
Well, friends and colleagues have been remembering the former leader of the Liberal Democrats, Lord Ashdown, who's died at the age of 77, just months after revealing he was being treated for bladder cancer.
Lord Ashdown led the Lib Dems for more than a decade, from 1988 until 1999, and he is credited with making the party a significant third force in British politics. Vicky Young has taken a look back at his life.
This is how most people will remember Paddy Ashdown, the action man, the party leader with the least affection for Westminster. Long before he fired his first political salvos, he was a military man, a Marine. He saw active service in Borneo and Malaya. After a period as a diplomat and some time on the dole, Paddy Ashdown got involved with the Liberals, elected MP for Yeovil in 1983. Later, in 1988, after the painful merger with the SDP that formed the Liberal Democrats, he became leader.
I say to the millions out there who are concerned about poverty and about unemployment, come and join us.
The party was at rock bottom in the polls and financially crippled. Paddy Ashdown built it up again, but at some cost to his home life. He admitted an affair with his former secretary, Tricia Howard.
What Paddy said stands. He's made a statement already, and I was perfectly well aware of what he was going to say.
Fears that his party's poll rating would suffer were unfounded, and in 1997 he guided it to its greatest election achievement since the 20s, doubling the number of Lib Dem MPs.
Charles Kennedy is duly elected.
Paddy Ashdown resigned the leadership in 1999, handing the baton on to Charles Kennedy and retiring from the House of Commons 2 years later. He spent time in Bosnia at some personal risk at the height of the war there. And in 2002 became the High Representative in Bosnia and Herzegovina. But he wasn't done with Westminster politics. In 2015, after the Lib Dems had spent 5 years in coalition with the Conservatives, Lord Ashdown returned to chair the party's general election campaign.
And we are saying the Conservatives are the largest party.
Famously disputing the exit poll's prediction of a dire result.
If this exit poll is right, Andrew, I will publicly eat my hat on your programme.
This
Andrew,
is a hat.
You are so predictable, aren't you? I just knew you'd do it.
I wanted to get a bigger one.
He inspired respect for his constant ideas and enthusiasm, and his efforts to build the Liberal Democrats into a force in national politics.
Well, let's take a look now at some of the tributes that have been paid to Lord Ashdown. The Prime Minister, Theresa May, sent her thoughts to his friends and family, adding that he had dedicated his life to public service and would be sorely missed.
The Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, praised Lord Ashdown's work as the MP for Yeovil, and he reminisced on their time in Parliament together. He said they often found themselves voting together against damaging policies.
The former Lib Dem leader, Tim Farron, said that Lord Ashdown had saved and revived the party at their lowest ebb.
And the current leader of the party, Sir Vince Cable, who we spoke to an hour ago here on Breakfast, declared that it was a hugely sad day for the Liberal Democrats and said that many members of the public had immense affection and respect for Lord Ashdown.
Well, we're going to be getting some reaction to the announcement that Lord Ashdown has died throughout the morning and on the rest of the programme. We're going to be speaking to the former Lib Dem leader, Nick Clegg, in just a few minutes' time. Right, let's move on. Let's talk about drones, shall we? They've dominated the news in the last week, and a man and woman are still being held in connection with those drone sightings that brought Gatwick Airport to a standstill in the beginning of the week.
Yes, police searched a house in the nearby town of Crawley yesterday. The disruption, as Victoria suggested, lasted quite a while, 3 days. Tens of thousands of passengers had their flights cancelled or delayed. Let's talk to Simon Clemerson. He's got the latest for us from our London newsroom this morning. Simon, morning to you. Just bring us up to date with the latest. These two people still being questioned, we understand.
Yes, they are indeed. Morning, Roger. Morning, Victoria. Yes, the first 24 hours since their arrest has now passed, so we are waiting to see whether police have applied to senior officers for more time for questioning them, or whether they've been charged, or whether they've been released. All we know is that the man is 47, the woman is 54, and one is thought to be a drone enthusiast. As you say, a house in Crawley, the main town near Gatwick Airport, has been searched, and this is all in relation to those sightings, which were on a number of occasions. A drone was spotted above the airfield, all beginning on Wednesday evening, meaning other aircraft, of course, had to be grounded for safety reasons. And that in the week before Christmas led to all the disruption which you might expect. 1,000 flights cancelled or diverted, 140,000 passengers affected. Every time the airport tried to reopen, the drones reappeared. Well, the Army has now secured the airspace. I've been checking the flights all morning, and they've been arriving and departing relatively on time, very few significant problems, but the advice is still to this day to check with your airline before you travel.
OK, Simon, thanks very much indeed. I know you'll continue to monitor developments. Simon Clemison now.
Now, a partial US government shutdown is set to continue through Christmas, with no deal in sight to break the deadlock over budget spending. The shutdown began at midnight on Friday, when Democrats refused to give in to President Trump's demands to use federal funds to build a wall against the US-Mexico border.
And it is now exactly 11 minutes past 8. There you go. Let's go back to our top story. The tributes have been made, many of them this morning, to the former Liberal Democrat leader, Lord Ashdown, Paddy Ashdown, who has died following a short illness.
He was an inspiration to so many people, including his friend and former Deputy Prime Minister, Sir Nick Clegg, who joins us now. Sir Nick, thank you very much for joining us this morning. How important a political figure was Lord Ashdown to you?
To me personally, he was, I think, by a long way, probably the most important friend and mentor that I had in my time in politics. I don't think I would have joined politics, actually. If I wasn't inspired as you know, sort of a young man by the stands that he took. I remember very well the very principled and courageous stand he took on an issue which may sound rather obscure now, but at the time certainly wasn't, which was about the rights of people in Hong Kong to have British passports. And I think, you know, I'm not alone. I think a lot of people were inspired by his clarity. He had this unusual ability, which was, he was of course courageous himself as a soldier, as a leader, in all the various things that he did, but he had this unusual ability to instill courage in other people and to push people to go, you know, beyond what they might be comfortable in doing. And I found in all the many, you know, thousands and thousands of conversations we had together, he had this great kind of way of making you just go that bit, you know, that step further than you would be inclined to yourself. And in the 20-odd years or so I was in parliamentary politics in Europe and in here, I don't think there was a week that went by when we didn't speak, often, you know, several times a week. And so, yeah, I will miss him terribly.
I'm so sorry for your loss. He was, as you say, a great mentor to you and a friend also. Yes,
yeah, he was. I mean, he had a great sort of sense of melodrama, which could sometimes be kind of comic. Everything was vital and important, and there was always big forks in the road and massive strategic chasms to cross. And he could. I remember once he came into my office when I was Deputy Prime Minister, and he said, "I've got to tell you something very, very serious, and this is really quite important to your fortunes and the fortunes of Liberal Democrats." And I thought, oh gosh, what have I done wrong now? And he sort of fixed me with that sort of beady military stare, and he said, "You're getting too fat." And so I received military instructions to it, which I then did, of course. I did promptly try and lose a bit of weight. So he sometimes didn't distinguish between the small and the big, but he always did everything with this trademark enthusiasm and energy. And what I loved about him, amongst so many other things, was that he was a politician. He loved politics. He cared about politics, but he actually hated the kind of cynicism and game playing of Westminster. His politics was much more rooted in Yeovil when he represented Yeovil, in the Balkans when he was active there, on international issues. It was an interesting mix. He was a politician in a sense to his fingertips, but he didn't like a lot of the kind of practice and theatre around politics in Westminster itself.
Yes, you alluded to it there. He was never really afraid, was he, to tell it straight to both his friends and his colleagues. He gave you some words of advice, did he not, about your new job at Facebook?
Yeah, he did. I mean, we talked about it at length before I decided to take up the job. And, I mean, it's typical Paddy. He sort of points out the risks, but also understood why taking up a challenge. And he was never someone to shirk a challenge. And I think that was one thing that I always admired in him and try to emulate, in a sense, is that if you're, you know, as we all go through life, it's always easier to sail away from the storm, but he was often quite inclined to sail towards the storm, if I could put it that way. And I think he's broadly right. I think, you know, and that's why he relished life as he did. He just did so many things. He was a soldier, he was a diplomat, he was a politician. Latterly, he was a highly accomplished writer, and he loved writing. He wrote beautifully. I hope one of the one of the sort of legacies or tributes to him will be that more people will read some of his excellent books that he's published in recent years.
You said that he hated the theatre of Westminster, that sort of element of politics. What do you think he would make of British politics as it stands today?
Well, I know what he thinks about. I mean, we were even corresponding by email from his hospital bed after the operation he had just recently. And I mean, as I think he made very clear himself, he was in a real state of despair and anger, actually, about what's happening in the whole sort of wider debate about Brexit. I think he would have been appalled at the kind of pantomime that we saw in Westminster last week, when all these big sort of weighty issues are still unresolved. He'd had a real ability, even as newspaper headlines are filled with, the latest who's up, who's down, to try and keep his own view fixed on the big picture, and that's something which is in pretty short supply in British politics at the moment. And so I think he'll not only be missed by his friends and his family, of course, but I also think the kind of politics he espoused will be missed as well.
Yeah, the action man of British politics. Sir Nick Clegg, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's really fascinating insight, wasn't it? Some really interesting anecdotes. 16 minutes past 8. Good morning. You're watching Breakfast from BBC News. Let's give you the headlines this morning. At least 168 people have been killed by a tsunami which hit the Indonesian islands of Java and Sumatra.
Senior politicians have been remembering the former Liberal Democrat leader Lord Ashdown, who has died at the age of 77.
Let's catch up with the weather forecast, shall we? Susan is with us this morning.
Oh,
there she is.
There she is.
Now, are those blue skies a sign of things to come, or are you just teasing us?
Just teasing you. The tree, of course, is the only sign, really, of things to come. It's a week ahead where most of us are going to be looking forward to at least a little bit of a holiday, maybe some time travelling to visit family and friends. Christmas week is going to be settled, but I think blue sky in quite short supply. It could end up rather grey. What we have today is the weather front across us, but that's the last rain I think we'll see for much of the week ahead. It's all going to be about high pressure building, but the high is likely to get some quite stubborn cloud trapped underneath it. So the best of any blue sky in the week ahead, likely, I think, in eastern areas. Today, while our weather watchers are waking up, here's Walking Tractor in Norwich showing us the shiny pavements where the rain is currently coming down. And it's those fronts across the southern half of the UK that will bring us a grey and wet morning today. Further north, Scotland starts with sunshine. It will be a chilly start. There's a few patches of mist and fog around as well. They should slowly lift, though, and by the time we get into the afternoon, the sunshine quite widespread. Any clouds south early on will tend to thin and break. Northern Ireland and Northern England improving quite dramatically too. A lot of the rain easing as we move into the second half of the day. We're just left with fairly solid cloud. But look to the west, and if you are going to be travelling or out and about after dark, worth grabbing the umbrella, because the rain is going to have a bit of a resurgence across the southwest of England initially, but then it will snake all the way across South Wales and into the southeast and parts of the South Midlands through the evening, before eventually starting to push away south as we go into the small hours of Monday. Much clearer skies to the north overnight into Christmas Eve, however, and that will set us up for quite a widespread frost the first thing on Christmas Eve, however, still very mild across southernmost counties. But because of the dry story, at least ice shouldn't be a problem first thing on Monday. Could again, though, be a few stubborn patches of mist and fog. Murky conditions where we have the remnants of the front for South Wales and the southwest of England first thing, but continuing to fizzle out that rain as the day goes on. A fresher feel than today, temperatures in mid to high single figures. And then on to Christmas Day, and as I said, you saw some sunshine there on my picture at the start, but unfortunately I think that will be in quite limited supply for Christmas Day. A lot of fine weather though. If you're lucky enough that Santa's bringing you a new bike or anything like that, you'll be able to get out and about for sure. But the sky is looking a little bit leaden at times, particularly in the west, murky around some of the coasts, a bit drizzly possibly too. In the east, your best chances of getting some sunshine, but here it will feel just a little chillier, so temperatures perhaps 7 or 8, so get that new knitted jumper out and, make Granny happy by putting that on. And then further ahead into the Christmas week, it looks like the story will hold pretty steady. Perhaps it gets a little bit milder, but the cloud is keen to keep us company as we go further through the week ahead. Newty.
No sign of a white Christmas.
No sign of a white Christmas.
All right. Susan, thanks very much indeed. We'll get more from Susan a little bit later.
Yeah.
We may break off in just a minute. We might go live to Indonesia just to get the very latest on this tsunami that is a developing story, as you know, during the course of the morning. So we might well interrupt what we're about to talk about. We're talking sport. A huge night of boxing last night with 2 bouts, one in Manchester, one in London.
In the capital, Dylan White was knocked out by Derek Chisora, while Josh Warrington was defeated by Carl Frampton to retain his world featherweight title in Manchester. Let's get more on all the boxing action with Mike Costello and Gareth Davis from The Telegraph.
Morning.
Morning. Mike, let's start with you. Some people are saying that this was the fight of the century, the one that was here in Manchester.
I'm not sure about fight of the century, but certainly one of the best of 2018. And it had been billed, likewise, going in as potentially one of the fights of 2018 because of the clash of styles where the 2 fighters, Josh Warrington and Carl Frampton, are at this stage of their respective careers. And virtually from the first bell, the crowd were on their feet, and it was non-stop action for 36 minutes for the 12 3-minute rounds. And it was just about boxing as good as it gets. It was absolutely fabulous. You know, I've been ringside for many, many years, and I haven't seen too many better fights than that, particularly all British affairs in a British ring. And Josh Warrington, the champion who won on points, actually went in as the underdog, as he did when he won the world title at Ellen Road in May earlier this year, and produced yet another performance of his life. He needed the performance of his life to win the title in May. He needed another such performance last night, and from somewhere he dredged it up and held on to his title.
Yeah. Should we get a quick thought from Gareth, who's in our London newsroom? Gareth A. Davis from the Telegraph. Gareth, morning to you. You were at the White Chisora fight. How was that?
Well, it was very similar to what Mike was talking about in some ways, that there was a 30-second feeling out process after an amazing fight they'd had 2 years ago in Manchester over 12 rounds, one of the best heavyweight fights we've ever seen on these shores between 2 British heavyweights. And then they went at it in the same way for the best part of 11 rounds until Dillian Whyte produced a hellacious left hook to lay Derek Chisora flat on the canvas. It was an amazing spectacle. It's a shame both fights were on at the same time in different cities, and this is a very unusual thing, but I think it's a sign that the promoters Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn are drawing the battle lines, and also that maybe we're saturated with fight sports at the moment.
So an interesting thought. The point you make is a really interesting one. Maybe Mike, you can answer this. But obviously they are 2 massive heavyweights, but they're not the biggest 2 heavyweights even in this country, are they? With Joshua and Tyson Fury. And then the fight you watched as well. I mean, British boxing's in a pretty good state at the minute, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And I was speaking to the promoter of the fight in London last night, Eddie Hearn, afterwards, and he's suggesting that these clashes might be happening more in 2019, simply because there are so many potentially great fights out there involving British fighters, whether it's 2 British fighters in the same ring or British fighters taking opportunity against those from overseas. But we might well be seeing more of this, and it underpins just how flourishing a state the sport is in at the moment. And you have to understand that promoters are looking for free television dates. They can't just go on any weekend of the year because television stations have other priorities on other weekends. And also they have to be aware of what sort of arenas are free to house and accommodate the expected turnout for fights of this size.
Gareth, just turning to you very quickly, do you think the next thing, do you think we're going to see a fight with Anthony Joshua? I know he was there, he was watching. Is it something we're going to see against Dylan Whyte? He's got a couple to do before then, hasn't he?
Well, I mean, at the moment, a date at Wembley Stadium is booked for April the 13th. Anthony Joshua and Eddie Hearn, his promoter, are saying they want to fight Deontay Wilder, who holds the only other belt, so they can unify the 4 belts that the division fights over. But it looks like Deontay Wilder will probably fight Tyson Fury again next. So Dillian Whyte drew Anthony Joshua up onto the ring apron, and Joshua committed that if he doesn't fight Wilder, he will fight Whyte. And they fought before, of course. They've got history of bad blood. It'll be a big event. I think since they fought 3 years ago, White's had an amazing run of 9 victories. He's really come on as a boxer, and I think he really deserves a shot at Anthony Joshua.
OK, thank you very much, Gareth Davies and Mike Costello. Thank you very much.
Thanks both very much. Thank you. Right, we're going to return to our top story now, the time at 8:25. That's the tsunami in Indonesia. 168 people have died, more than 700 injured. That death toll is rising all the time. The BBC's Indonesia editor is Rebecca Henschke. She joins us now live from the region. And Rebecca, thank you for talking to us. Just bring us up to date with the very latest, because this death toll seems to be rising all the time.
It does indeed. I mean, where we are now is in Anyar, at the edge of the affected area. As you can see behind me, the houses and the shops here along the beachfront have been flattened by the waves. These are buildings made of wood and bamboo and leaves. The woman here that runs this shop says that she was hoping that this holiday season would be a time of great income coming in. This area is a very popular tourist destination for Indonesians at this time, yet now she's lost everything. Her house over there collapsed. They had to flee, running up to higher ground to get away from the waves. You're probably hearing the sound of ambulances going by on the main road here coming into the area. We're hearing reports of local health centres struggling to deal with the injured, so people are being taken out of this area to the main hospitals for treatment. More than 600 people are injured, according to the officials, and saying that number also is likely to rise. They get a clearer picture of the devastation.
And Rebecca, just a thought where you are. It seems that in that part of the world, events like this are, well, they're certainly seemingly becoming increasingly frequent.
It has indeed been a very difficult year for Indonesia, of course, with the tsunami in Sulawesi, in Palu, not that long ago. And people here really feeling a sense of devastation once again. They say that there was no warning that a tsunami was going to hit late last night. The officials saying that this time the natural disaster appears to have been triggered by volcanic activity by Anak Krakatoa, the child of the famous Krakatoa volcano, an underwater landslide. So yet another different kind of disaster hitting Indonesia, and once again giving people a lot to deal with at a time like this when they were really hoping to be with their families.
And Rebecca, just you touched there on the cause of this. We've heard in previous incidents about earthquakes happening under the sea, but this is some kind of volcanic activity.
That's right, that's what they're saying. They're still investigating, but the Anak Krakatoa has been erupting and there's been volcanic activity. It's not a huge volcano by Indonesian standards, but it rises out of the Sunda Straits, out of the sea. So the National Disaster Agency believes that below the sea, perhaps, this volcanic activity triggered a landslide strong enough to trigger this tsunami. Now, they're also saying that given the nature of this tsunami, very different from one triggered by an earthquake, that there could be more tsunamis in this area. So people are being told to get away from the beach, to be very careful, because that volcanic activity is quite unpredictable. And they're still trying to understand what took place.
And Rebecca, in terms of the death toll, obviously, very sadly, a lot of local people will have been caught up in that. But is this a big tourist area? Are we likely to see people from other countries who've lost their lives here?
It's a big domestic tourist destination. People come here from the main capital, Jakarta, to reach these beaches. It has been growing in popularity with international tourists, and we have heard from international tourists who were in the area and survived the tsunami. At this stage, we haven't heard of any amongst that death toll. But again, this is very much an emerging situation where information is changing very rapidly.
Rebecca, we're very grateful to you. Thank you very much indeed for talking to us. Rebecca Henschke there, who is our Indonesia editor.
There is plenty more on that story developing on the BBC website if you want to go and have a look. Lots more statements coming through. bbc.co.uk/news if you want some more on that story.
Right, coming up before the end of the programme at 9 o'clock, the nation watched transfixed as Torvill and Dean, remember that, skated their way to sporting history. Many of you probably too young to, but we both do. Now a Christmas Day biopic deals with the romance rumours and family trauma behind their incredible journey to Olympic gold. Breakfast has been to meet them. Stay with us, headlines are on the way.
This is the DNA of the most dangerous creature in the universe.
What?
It's been buried on Earth since the 9th century. It's not going to stop until it's taken control of this planet. It's going to kill anyone that gets in its path.
Does it have a name?
My mouth is watering.
It really does remind me Christmas is coming.
Well, if we have to leave on a laugh, it might as well be that one.
Oh, if you could smell this.
Mary Berry's Country House at Christmas. Christmas Day at 6:35 on BBC Two.
Hello, good morning. This is Breakfast with Victoria Fritz and Roger Johnson.
The time is 31 minutes past 8. Here's a summary of the main news today. At least 168 people are now known to have died and at least 750 more have been injured after a tsunami hit the coast of Indonesia. It's thought to have been caused by an undersea landslide following eruptions from the Krakatoa volcano. The tsunami hit the coast on the Sunda Strait, which separates the islands of Java and Sumatra. The country's disaster management agency says that hundreds of buildings were damaged and at least 20 people are still missing.
Here, tributes have been paid to the former Liberal Democrat leader, Paddy Ashdown, who died yesterday at the age of 77.
Well, joining us now from Edinburgh is Lord Ming Campbell, who Lord Ashdown publicly supported in the 2006 leadership campaign. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Good morning.
How important was that public backing that you received from Lord Ashdown?
Well, Paddy, of course, was such a large figure both inside and outside of the party. And to have his support, obviously, in a campaign of that kind was extremely important. But, of course, it was a measure of Paddy's commitment to the party that he wouldn't stand back and fail to give an opinion on something that he felt was important. I mean, I've been thinking how one could sum him up. Courageous, committed, charismatic. He was occasionally impatient with some of the more arcane conventions of British politics, but he was someone who gave body and soul every day, every waking moment when it came to politics, as indeed he did to other things, not least, of course, his time as the United Nations High Representative in Bosnia, when he managed to create a fragile status quo there, although he remained deeply disappointed that there wasn't more progress towards more stability in that part of the world, in spite of the enormous efforts he'd put into it himself.
He did draw admirers from right across the political spectrum, didn't he?
Of course. You couldn't help but admire someone who had such enormous energy. I mean, he was impatient, of that there's no doubt. He would accept that of himself. But everything he did, all of his actions,